Can you hear me okay? I'm not used to this, so. All right, well, when I was asked to do this, I was a little leery. I still am a little bit. I've never done a talk on the Wildes Family Massacre before. I've done a talk, I did a talk at the reunion one year on the four brothers that survived and where they went afterwards, how they grew up, what their lives were, Civil War activity, that kind of thing. So this is a whole new experience. Like I said, I'm sorry about the speaker. I don't know when I'm in the right place or not. Bear with me. Bear with me. I'm not a PowerPoint expert. I'm not a graphic artist. There are a couple of slides in here that look really ridiculous, so just, if you want to, don't look at them. Tried to use my imagination as best I could, but it was a challenge. Anyway, so I do want to ask, are there any Wildes family members here in the room? I see your hands. Is that all of them? Okay, y'all can be excused then. This is for the people who hadn't heard anything yet. So, anyway, yeah, as Carolyn said, I've been doing Wildes family research. I picked it up from other cousins that picked it up. The original family history book was written 2 years before I was born. So what I've had to do over the years is add on to it as best I can. And after today, we will be full force into working on the next one. We've had some hurricanes and some family illnesses come up. Julie is going to help me. We're going to do the next book, and I think we're getting excited about it. Oh, yeah. It's going to be a lot of work, and hopefully we can get a lot of help from the Wildes family to help us out. So anyway, we're talking about the Wildes Family Massacre. It happened in Ware County, and it was Ware County at that time. There weren't too many counties, and I don't know the facts on how many counties or which ones were which. That's for another day. But it did happen just kind of southwest of downtown Waycross. And I do have a map on here I'll show you later. And the Wildes family does have a long line of stories and what happened, how it happened, and that kind of thing. A lot of it, we, of course, went word of mouth. A lot of it was, there's a lot of newspaper clippings. Over the years, they put these newspaper clippings in the family book. I've put them in the family book. But when you go through and you read them, this says one thing, this says something totally different, and we really don't know. So I'm going to give it my best shot, show you what I've learned. And to me, one of the biggest things to ask about it is why did these Indians come out of the swamp and hurt the family? What was their problem? So that's where I'm going to start. So originally we had the colony of Georgia was formed. It was established in 1732. James Oglethorpe, head guy. And when he came in and set it up, they were bringing, Georgia was set up for migrants that were poor and needed a place to go and start over. It was keep them out of trouble, keep them from being in trouble, keeping them for poorhouse. I'm not sure what they lived in at the time. But anyway, that was part of the idea of establishing Georgia. Can you still hear me? Mm-hmm. So Savannah, of course, became the first settlement, and that was in 1733. It became the first capital of Georgia. The capital moved eventually from Savannah, went to Augusta, and then it went to Milledgeville, and then ended up in Atlanta not too long ago, relatively speaking. So now I want to talk about some Indians. And they're called, officially, I see them in a lot of places referred to as the Muskogee Creek tribe. But in short, they're referred to as the Creeks or the Creek Indians. They had pretty much what you see. Their territory was Georgia, Alabama, and the upper part of what's now Florida. There were different bands of the Creek. They had different ones. They had Upper Creek, Lower Creek, and I can't remember what the other ones were. And there's actually another band that was in Alabama. I think of the name of it, but anyway. But as it turned out, when I was doing research on the Indians part of the story, there were a whole bunch of different tribes, all kinds of different names and such. So it's kind of hard to, when I was looking at it, I thought, well, who was in what area and who was in what area? And as it turned out, they overlapped over each other, just like we do today anyway. So, but the Creeks are the ones that carry this story more than anything, because of the fact that they are a big part of this story of what changed in Georgia, the United States. I mean, it is our history. So initially, the neutral zone was set up, and that was in 1736. And it was kind of below there where it says territory, kind of down. They set this up because the British and the Spanish weren't too particularly fond of each other, didn't particularly want to deal with each other as far as where the land was concerned. So they went in and put this buffer area in, so that the Spanish can kind of feel, the Spanish could feel a little bit safe from the English encroachment on their area. And it was also to promote for the Creeks to work with the deerskin trade. They were fur trade and such. So it gave them a space to kind of be free to do their thing, and it gave them that buffer line. So then, in 1739 began the beginning of treaties where the Creek were having to give up so much of their land, and back then, you know, the Indians, they didn't believe in property. They didn't believe that, you know, this is our land. Here's the line, and this belongs to this group. They didn't believe in coming in and chopping up parcels, and you own this acre and you own this acre. They didn't believe in that. They just believed that the land belonged to everybody. So when the colonists came over and said, hey, you know, this is ours, I want this 100 acres and that kind of thing, the Indians just didn't understand that. So that was probably one of the biggest problems that the settlers had with the Indians. So the first treaty was the Treaty of Savannah, and that one gave the British. It gave the British colony just a kind of a big band along the coast of the Georgia there. I don't know how big, I couldn't tell you. I didn't get that far into that part of the research, but they did. It's a wide section just along the Atlantic coast. And then after those treaties, after the treaty started, every so many years there'd be another treaty, and it would be for different reasons. In some cases it was because of debts that were owed to the English. And for some reason with the fur trades, that kind of thing. So there were debts. They had all kinds of reasons, and of course the English, what they wanted to do was get the land. So the more treaties they got, the more land they got, and they kept scooting them further out and further out. Now some of these treaties, the Creeks, they didn't like that. They didn't like the idea of having these treaties. They didn't want anything to do with it. They didn't want to give up their land or their territory or everybody's land, if you want to call it that. And some of them just started resisting to it. Some of them just kind of started migrating away, trying to get away from kind of what do you want to call it, an invasion more or less. But and And then some of them they just started migrating down into Florida. And as they migrated down into Florida, at the same time, there were black slaves that were trying to get away from plantation owners and their other owners. And so they were escaping down into that area. And in the 1770s, they began calling these people Seminoles. And the Seminoles, well, they were in Florida, and a lot of them, they were further down Florida than what you're seeing there. Because, they did go way down towards the Everglades and that kind of area. Of course, that's where some of them are today. But the Seminoles and the black slaves, and these black slaves that were living among the Seminoles they called them Black Seminoles. And there actually is a whole tribe of descendants of that group. And they're preserving their heritage, and I'd like to learn more about it. I'm sure it's very interesting. So now, this is one of my ugly slides. We're at the First Seminole War. And the reason for the First Seminole, the reasons for the First Seminole War, and bear with me, I'm going to look at my notes here. Of course, the U.S. was now a country. Now we had the United States, America. We had our revolution, and we were now a country. And the United States wanted to expand its borders as well as take over Spanish-ruled Florida. They wanted to secure the trade along the rivers, protect, their goods and such. And not quite, I guess, from being stolen. I know back then it was pretty. You didn't have the protection that we have now for boats that are out on the border. But even on the rivers, just the rivers is where they were trying to protect. And they also wanted to protect their border from European invasion. Because now it's America, United States of America. We want this to be ours. We don't want anybody to come in and run us out. We want our protection. The United States also wanted to capture the runaway slaves and the Black Seminoles so they could return them back to their owners. And because of this, the United States was doing raids on the borders, below the border sometimes, and the Seminoles would retaliate against the United States. And they'd go into villages and they'd kill people, burn things down, and the U.S. was doing the same thing in the Seminole villages. So yeah, when the U.S. started that war, they attacked the Seminole village called Foultown. That was supposedly the first one that got it going. They destroyed Spanish forts. They burned British-owned plantations, because you still had some British folks that were kind of lingering around that had not become part of the United States, obviously. But eventually the war ended in a stalemate, and the Seminoles pretty much moved further back down into the Everglades. And not long after that, Spain ceded Florida to the United States. So now Florida has joined. So now I'm going to skip to where we talk about not knowing all the facts, not knowing exactly what's true, the hand-me-down stories, the written stories. Those of us in the Wildes family, we know there's all kinds of stories about our ancestor and stories about the massacre itself. So the family story, as I had always heard it, was that our ancestor, his name was Maximilian Wildes, and he was the family head that when the massacre occurred, he was the head of the family there in Waycross. It was his family. So anyway, the story is he was a stowaway from Scotland at the age of 12. That's what we always heard. That's what my grandmother believed, that's what my great aunt believed, that was what everybody believed, that's what we've always been told. And nobody ever had any doubt of it. It was in the newspaper articles, it was written, family histories that were written. I mean, it was a given. The guy was 12 years old, got on a boat in Scotland, hiding in a cargo hold, eating scraps of food. He drinking rainwater. You can imagine the stench of livestock on the boat. The loneliness, and the feelings of isolation, and being scared out of your mind, being discovered. You know what's going to happen, and I've thought about it many times, and I'm thinking, how long can he be on a boat without getting discovered? I mean, how long could he have been there? Boats weren't, I mean, they were good-sized boats, but they weren't that big. So, but I never questioned that. That didn't start happening until I got older and started learning, doing research and such. And as far as I know, that's the way it was. But then there were some questions that also came up. I call this "What's your name? Where are you from?" because that is probably one of the biggest questions we have on the genealogy research end of the family. We've done DNA. We've researched all of the, as many records as we get our hands on. At least I know I have. Julie has too. And there's a lot of information out there, and a lot of it clears things up. But what's really interesting is that we even have, I don't know, some of you who are from here might remember Gertrude Wildes Johnson. Miss Gertrude, she was my great aunt, and she had written about a 2.5, almost 3, I guess it was about 2.5 page story of her version of what her father had told her had happened for the massacre. But now he was the grandson. Well, yeah, it was his grandfather was one of the sons that survived it. So who knows how many times this story had been handed down by the time he got to it, and then turned around and told her, and then she wrote it down. And I've had members of the family say, well, that's what she wrote. That's exactly how it happened. That's exactly, how many there were. But one of the things that she wrote in there in her account was that Maximilian was from England. And that one's kind of baffled me for a while, because in our first 2 history books that were released in the family, both times it mentions that Maximilian was from Scotland. And we, when I saw that, when I was digging, and I saw, why did she say England when all these years we've been told Scotland? I don't know. She's not here. I can't ask her. But I sure wish I could. And then also, there's a newspaper article from 1888, and it said his name was James Wildes. That doesn't sound like Maximilian Wildes. Where that came from, I wasn't sure. And it said he was from Virginia. So there you go. That's how the story gets handed down, as she was talking about with the plain telephone. It could get changed quite a bit. So over the years, the family, different family members have done the research. They've documented it, put it in the family history book, and we came to the point where we were, I don't know when it happened exactly. I'm pretty sure it was in the 80s, but it was before the second family history book went out. A letter appeared. And this letter was written by R.H. Wilde. He's the guy in the top right-hand corner. He was an attorney, and he was a representative, a Georgia congressman, represented Georgia in Congress. And he was based out of Augusta. He was a judge there as well. He was in all kinds of things. He ended up being a professor of law. And he was a poet. And if you were to read the letter that he wrote, you could tell that the guy was a poet. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you because it's pretty involved, and I'd have to stop every 3 seconds and then explain something. So I'm going to try to give you a summary of what the letter said. The letter he wrote to the man below, and that is Samuel Sumner Wild. Same last name as R.H. Wild. And in the letter, Samuel Sumner Wild was a Supreme Court justice for the state of Massachusetts. So these guys they knew each other. He mentions in the letter the fact that they'd known each other for a long time and that they were cousins, but they were also friends. And but the letter was a plea from R.H. to Sam to forgive his son, James. James had moved to Augusta with his wife, young wife. They were very young. And they were living with R.H. and his family. They had left Boston. They moved to Augusta. They were living with R.H. and his family, had been for the previous 3 years. The letter was written in 1820. I'm sorry, I forgot to put that in there. And he said that James was working in the warehouse for him for his family's business, which would have been on the river there in Augusta. I imagine is where they had all the warehouses with all the shipping and everything, because it was a big trade area. And that they were planning to move into Georgia's interior because they'd heard such good things about it. It was supposed to be a great place to go and great place to start up your own homestead, etc. So he was saving up his money to go. And because his dad had disowned him, he thought, well, I'll just distance myself a little bit more and I'll change my name. And he changed his name to Maximilian Wildes. So he also had found a ship's captain to back him up on the story that he was a stowaway on a boat from Scotland. So how about that? Very interesting similarities there. But R.H. was mostly asking Sam, please forgive him. They've had a child. You know, you're missing out on having a grandchild. You're missing out on knowing your son. Forgive him and put the family back together. Well, that never happened. Instead, Maximilian, James, whichever one you want to call him, he and his family, he and Etta, his wife, they moved into the interior of Georgia. Somewhere it said that they had moved into Montgomery County to a Scotch settlement, but somehow they ended up in Ware County, below what is now Waycross. And it's called, I've seen it written as Dubose Bay, Dubose Bay, probably a couple of different spellings and pronunciations. And it's just basically a big wetland area down there, or up there from here. So they moved there, they set up their home, set up his farm, and just did the settler kind of thing. Don't know a lot about it, that time period. We still don't have a whole lot of information about when they came to the Okefenokee swamp, it was wild as wild as can be. I mean, it was unknown, untouched. Just the Indians knew their way around. And you can imagine with learning to fight the elements, dealing with all the animals, the insects, and just dealing with all of the not knowing what you're getting yourself into, and just what's going to happen here. I can't imagine how tough that would have been, especially knowing how hot it is here, and you're not used to it. They were from Maine or Scotland. I'm sure they weren't used to that kind of heat, whichever one he was from, or Massachusetts, excuse me. So they did, though. They came in, they settled, and expanded the family. Now there's some confusion in our research as to whether or not that is the same woman that was the mother of the rest of his children, or maybe she had passed on and he remarried because there was someone else. There's a lot of records that show he married a lady named Wilkinson, and she's had every name from Etta, Elizabeth, Mary, Sarah, and there was one other name she had. I can't remember. But anyway, in all the different research, she has a different name. So I'm not clear on that yet. I'm still working on that angle. There are some theories in the family. Some believe this, some believe that, but that's okay. We'll just keep digging. So now that they're settled into the swamp, the U.S. is at it again, and they decided to write and pass, well, President Andrew Jackson passed the Indian Removal Act of 1830. And the purpose of that was to remove the 5 civilized tribes that were pretty much east of the Mississippi. Get them all out of here, get them to the other side of the Mississippi, and let the new people have the land. They wanted to farm it. Cotton was a big attraction. They just wanted these lands for all the farming and such. And in the end, even after the second, well, I'm gonna get my dates messed up. The Trail of Tears was 1838 to 1839, so it was later on when they finally finished getting all of the Indians out that they could. The ones they didn't get out were, well, it was mostly Seminoles that they were having to fight at that point, and they all, whichever ones didn't get out, ended up down in the Everglades. I may have gotten ahead of myself there a little bit. But anyway, that was 1830. They said, okay, the Indians have to go. Then in 1832, the Treaty of Payne's Landing was signed, and that was agreed between the Seminoles and the United States. And the agreement was that in 3 years, all the Seminoles would be west of the Mississippi. They agreed, okay, fine, we'll go. You can have it. Well, 3 years later, in 1835, the U.S. came back, and I don't know, I'm kind of joke at this. They kind of came back to check, and lo and behold, they hadn't left. So they got mad at them, said, well, you still got to go. That was the plan. And so their goal was to come in and find every single Seminole, every single village, destroy the villages and get the Seminoles out and run them, purposefully run them out. So that began. Of course, again, a lot of them didn't want to leave. And then some of them just started hiding in the swamp. The Okefenokee Swamp. A lot of them were able to go in, come back out and fight, go back in, come back out and fight. And they were also known for their guerrilla warfare, apparently pretty good at it, which made a challenge for the Americans. And then in spring 1838, they weren't able to finish getting them flushed out of the swamp. They still would pop up every now and then. They called it sign. They didn't call it the sign. They didn't call it a sign. They just called it sign. And I'm not even really sure how to use it in a sentence, other than what I saw in one letter that was written. But, so they started building the forts around the swamp, and that was their mission at that point, was to finish running them out. Get them all out of there. That's the whole purpose. So, this is a picture of the swamp I stole from somewhere. And it has, probably can't see very well, but there's little squares, and it has the names of the different forts that are around. And those were all built one after the other. From what I learned, some of them were built, one would be built here, one would be built there. They just kind of alternated around where they needed to. You can see, of course, where Trader's Hill is on the right. Right there at the tip of the St. Mary's on that corner, if you would. And you can see our Charlton County dip right there. But that's where it got really intense after the spring of 1838. And there were massacres going on. The Seminoles were still going out. They were still going to settlements. They were killing people. They were stealing from them. They were burning their homes down. It was happening all over the place. So, along came Sunday, June the 22nd, 1838. Now, I don't know what kind of day it was. I don't know what the weather was like. I couldn't tell you. I don't know. I don't have a clue. It wasn't there. We could kind of look back through a little window. But it was on a Sunday morning. And the long and short of it is, and I've joked about this since I started taking this over. The long and the short of it is the Indians came into the encampment where the Wildes family was living. They attacked. Apparently it was gruesome, I would imagine. And they stole from them and they burned the house down. That's the long and short of the story. The fun part about it is you have old newspapers and such that would tell stories about it. And this is, I think, one of the oldest articles I found. And I just snipped the top of it. Of course, you see Wildes is spelled differently than what we spell it. Well, actually, some of the family does spell it without the E, and that's another long story. But a peaceful family of settlers were butchered upon the order of the cruel Seminole chief Billy Bowlegs. And this is the story of the only survivor. And there is a repeat in the history that Billy Bowlegs ordered this massacre. There's no proof of it. Billy Bowlegs was a Seminole chief. He was a very big fighter in the Seminole Wars, or the Second Seminole War. He was a big mover and shaker, and standing his ground, did not want the Seminoles to have to leave. And he was going to do everything he could to try to fight and keep them here. But eventually he got pushed out too with the Trail of Tears. This is another newspaper clipping that it's in all of our family history books. And it was written in 1927. It's about probably 2 whole newspaper sheets, 2 pages wide of the newspaper. I only put a part of it in here. And growing up, I just assumed right there in that picture is what happened. I mean, as far as I knew in my mind, somebody drew that was there and they knew what happened. Now I know somebody was creative. And it's funny too, because in a lot of the articles, some of them have the wrong year, like 18, and I accidentally did it myself the other day. Instead of 1838, I think this one says 1832. Yes, this one says 1832. And another thing that comes up is how many people died in the massacre. So anyway, that's the fun part of doing the research, as I keep mentioning. You just find all kinds of things. Well, that doesn't make sense, or maybe that makes sense. But after the massacre, there was one document. We have one written document that we can, in my mind, I fully believe is as close to the truth as we'll ever get. The document was written from Colonel Hilliard, Thomas Hilliard. He had written this letter to the governor, George Gilmer, right after it had happened. And he said the family had been attacked by a party of about 50 Indians. Said that Wildes, his wife, 6 of their children, and 1 of the neighbor's children were murdered. 4 only out of 13 made their escape. Afterwards, he says that Captain Dade of the United States Dragoons, I'm probably not saying that right, who were stationed within 3 miles of the scene of depredation with about 40 men, went in pursuit of the Indians. And then he said that the Indians were gone and succeeded in reaching the swamp before the troops could get to them. After that happened, I think he did mention, he mentioned the 4. It says 4 out of 13 made their escape. We do now know that four of the sons of Maximilian Wildes did survive, and they did make the escape. But there's also a story that there was a cousin that had lived nearby, and she'd been over spending the night, and that apparently she got away too. I'm pretty sure that's a true story. I don't have it in stone at this point. But we do know the 4 brothers survived, that's for sure, because there's a bunch of us that get together every year that descend from them. They, okay, so he mentioned what happened was, after the massacre, everyone got really scared. All the settlers, these new settlers had come, and they knew what was going on around them, but they kind of just held out and hoped for the best, I guess, is what they were trying to do. And what ended up happening was, after this massacre, everybody got scared and up and left. They started packing up and got the heck out of Ware County. He said on here, that all the territory south and southwest of Blackshear's Road is entirely abandoned. That would be today's 82, I think. US 82, going across there. It said upwards of 30 families had left their homes, and the number is increasing by the hour. Let's see. And here's where he said that. He said that there's no part of Ware County that's bordering along the swamp where the sign can be seen. So that's where I said it gets kind of confusing. So he asked the governor for more provisions and ammunition, said, send help, we got to get rid of these Indians. But that was the last family massacre. And they call it the last Indian massacre in the state of Georgia, but apparently there was actually one more raid that happened after that. It was on a trailer, it was on a supply wagon, but it was probably just a couple of days or so later. It wasn't very long after that, and it was more towards it was at the army. It wasn't towards any settlers. So as far as just regular settlers, that kind of thing, it was the last Indian massacre in the state of Georgia against any family, any settlers. So, bear with me a second here. I was going to show you a map. I had to do some editing here. So like I said, way up there is Waycross. Down here in this little field is the massacre site. That to the left of it, that green area, that's DuBois Bay, however you want to pronounce it. And you can see the wetlands just a little bit there on that map. So I'm just going to kind of give you some highlights of the boys that survived, a little bit about them, about the Wildes family itself. And I'm sorry I didn't have anything more exciting to tell about the massacre itself, but I wasn't there. So. But the 4 brothers did survive. Reuben, he was the oldest. He was 15 years old at the time of the massacre. He lived to be 77, and he was a farmer in Waresboro, is where he had his farm, raised his family. And he was in the Civil War. Jesse, he was 12 years old at the time of the massacre. I mean, can you imagine? Just at that age and just seeing your whole family getting killed and just everything gone. I mean, and having to start over as just a little person. But Jesse lived to be 31. He and his wife only had 2 children. He married a Matilda Coward. They were in Tattnall County. Reuben had 8 children. Jesse had 2. And then James, he was 10 at the time of the massacre. He lived to be 84. He had 10 children, and he married Samantha Coward. And Samantha and Matilda were sisters, so it was 2 brothers married 2 sisters. James fought in the Civil War. Jesse did not fight the Civil War. He didn't live long enough to begin the Civil War. And then John, the youngest, he was 8 at the time of the massacre. He only lived to be 51 years old. They had 12 children. And he was a farmer in Charlton County, at least part of the time. I don't know what happened. Maybe some borders got moved, and eventually I think he ended up in Ware County again, and that's where he and Sarah Jane Nunez are buried. Most of the Wildes descendants that attend the family reunion every year are John descendants, because there were so many kids to start making so many people. You can count on most of the people being there. There are John descendants. We just pretty much expect that. And he too fought in the Civil War. He married a woman, Sarah Jane Nunez. She has an interesting history, but I won't even go there yet. So, for her roots, but they're from Portugal. I'll throw that one in there for you. So I don't know, this kid whose dad was from Scotland or from Maine, or Massachusetts or somewhere, and he married a girl that was a descendant of some Portuguese folks. So at the massacre site, there is a marker, a grave marker, and it was set there by the Daughters of the American Revolution back in 1935. I know you can't read that from back there, but those of you who haven't seen it before, it says here, Sunday, July 22nd, 1838, Indians massacred 7 members of the Wildes family. Their bodies were placed in a wagon body and laid to rest in this grave. And now the story is that it was so, they were so scared of the Indians coming back, and they wanted to clean things up real fast, that they had a brand new wagon had been built. And so they went and dug a hole, put the family in the wagon, and buried them all in that one wagon. That part of the story is also in Colonel Hilliard's letter. Now the Wildes family has, back in I don't remember what year it was in the 70s, one of the family members had an old log cabin available, and was able to donate it to the Okefenokee Swamp Park up in Waycross. And the family put it in, fixed it up. They hired someone who had done work for Disney down in Florida to come in and build a diorama. And the little diorama tells the story of the massacre from whoever's point of view it was that told the story at that time. But it's called the Wildes Family Museum. And there's different things on display in there. Some pictures, just different things that pertain to the family's history. And you can, like I said, you can access it when you're at the Okefenokee Swamp Park up in Waycross. And they put a marker out there in the front, and it says on there, a few miles from this site, on Sunday, July 22, 1838. See, so far we're in agreement. It says Creek, and then it puts in parentheses Seminole, and then it says Indians massacred 7 members of the Wildes family. This was the last Indian massacre in Georgia. 4 sons escaped: Reuben, Jesse, James, and John. This marker, placed by their descendants, erected October 14, 1979. That's when they put all that in there. If you ever get a chance to go, if you've never been up to the Okefenokee Swamp Park, it'd be worth the trip, and especially walk through the museum and just kind of look at all the old stuff, watch the diorama. It has some damages. I think they've fixed them now. It's working again. We, as the Wildes family, try to keep it maintained as much as we can. And let's see. This was the first Wildes family reunion. 1955, I think it was. I was going to tell y'all it was last year's, but I didn't think you'd believe me. And as for Charlton County, I didn't have a whole lot to talk about. The descendants in Charlton County. John, the youngest son, John, who, like I said, had 12 kids. His oldest son, Alexander Flournoy Wildes, came to Charlton County, and he had a farm out. It was out past. It's near Centerville. It was in the Centerville area. The people that are living on his land now live in Spring Lake subdivision. Not the whole subdivision, but part of it. He owned. I think. I can't remember. I've seen the sign, or I've seen the note where I think it's like 30 acres or something like that. So my boyfriend happens to live in it too. I told him, I said, hey, you're on family land. You don't belong here, but he won't buy it. But Mr. Alexander Flournoy, I love this picture of him on his horse in front of his house. And he had, oh my goodness, I forgot to write it down how many kids he had. He had a bunch, yes, he did. And anyway, the children that he had, some of them stayed here in Charlton County, some of them moved on to other places. My great-grandfather, Matt Wildes, was the oldest of his children, and he was always here. He was always in Charlton County. He was at one time the county surveyor. Well, several times. I had the notes on it. He was the county surveyor. RH was a coroner a few times, which was Mac's brother, and something else. Well, anyway, and what I was going to say about Mac, found out that he had. I knew about this article, and I came across it the other day. One of the neat things about the Charlton County Herald, you go back and look at these old stories. Every time I've sat and looked through them, we just sit there and laugh because it's just hilarious the way a lot of them are written. And there's one in there about it's not necessarily funny, but there's an article in there about, it says, 5 Wildes brothers at war. And then what had happened was Mac Wildes, he had 5 sons in World War II at the same time. And then RH had 3. Yep. And the RH had 3 sons in World War II at the same time. And these were all Charlton County people. And one more thing I'll do. Alexander had 9? Okay. And I've just got one more slide here. This is if you don't look, you'll miss it when you're driving around Waycross. There's this historical marker that talks about the massacre. And again, back to whether the numbers are right, the dates are right. This says it happened in July of 1832 again. That 7 members, and I've seen where it was 9 members were killed. I've seen where it was 11 members were in the massacre. I have seen so many numbers, it's not even funny. So, like I said, that's kind of up to your guess. There's They were murdered by an Indian raiding party from the Okefenokee Swamp. 6 of the victims were of the Wildes family. 1 was a 12-year-old girl, the Wilkinsons. 5 children escaped to the post house 2 miles away after the massacre, and then the Indians robbed and burned the Wildes home down. And that's pretty much what's in the letter that, Colonel Hilliard had written. So, history is a funny thing. Researching history is a funny thing. You could get into a wormhole. I've done it. I don't know how many times I've sat down to do something, and I wonder what this is about. And click on it. Oh boy! I'm going to tell you all something. I'm going to admit something right here in front of every one of you. I've told some of you this. Don't hold it against me. I mean, I'm supposed to be a Wildes family historian. And I've done all this research. Guess what class? One class I failed in high school. American history. I had to take it again to graduate. I still got to college, but I failed that class. I was so lost in there. I had the worst time in that class, and I couldn't tell you now what we talked about, but I had to take it again, and when I took it again, I took a version of, they had different types of choices you could take of the classes. So when I took it again, I ended up in the class where I had to memorize all the presidents in order, the years, and this. Memorizing, not my thing. I don't know how I did it, but I pulled it off. I graduated. That was the one class that I failed. Well, no, there was a second one. That's not short. But anyway, English literature. Let's not go there. But there's just so many things that when you're delving into this, and I don't know, I just find it fun. All things considered with my history, my history with history. So anyway, are there any questions? Anybody? Yes.
Sarah, I just want to say I appreciate all that you've done. It's always good to be here, and I thank you for your consistency and what you've been able to offer us and show us. It's been really
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes.
We think it was an infant. Most of the time the story goes that it was an infant. I'm of the belief that there was an 18-year-old daughter, because one of the stories talks about the oldest daughter was holding the infant, and the daughter and the infant were killed. I think that oldest daughter is the one that James and Etta had when they moved to Augusta before they went into the wild. I believe that was her. The history says it was Mary Ann was her name, I think it was. So I've always been under the impression they were between 18 and infant in ages and the children. But like I said, we don't know exactly how many. But yeah, I guess they just came in and killed whoever they could. Basically, from what we understand, the children that did get away, they just happened to run like crazy and got out of there. There was a fort nearby that they ran to that was near Kettle Creek. And I think that's where Gilman was at the time. And that's when the groups went back out and tried to find the Indians and couldn't find them. They'd gotten away, so. Anything else? Any questions? I'm sorry? That sign is, help me out, Waycross. Yeah, the LL Creek restaurant is like right across the street. If you're, excuse me, if you're going along and you're getting ready to go under the railroad track, and LL Creek restaurant's on your right, it's on the left, and it's kind of on a hill a little bit, sort of. I know I had to look for it the first time I went looking for it because I didn't know my way around.
You know, years ago, it used to be up at the intersection of, our Waycross Highway and 82. It used to be up in that little triangle before they widened everything. And I can remember as a child,
Sarah,
Do you have any more questions?
have they made it, has the people that own the property now where the site is, are they still not allowing any public, you don't know? We need to research that. Okay.
What she was asking is, the marker, the other one, the monument where the burial site is on private property. It's on a private farm. A few years back, I can't remember how long ago it was now, that we were able to go in and we actually were able to have a service out there. The people that lived there at the time let us on the property. We came out, we set up a tent. We pretty much had a memorial service for them at that time. And they were really kind to let us on the property to do this. But then unfortunately, it got sold to somebody else, and we were told we can't go on the property anymore. And it's kind of been an ongoing frustrating thing for us year to year. I was actually thinking about looking into that again this year because I know it's going to come up at the next reunion.
Legally, in the state of Georgia, family members, no matter if it is on private property, family members are, by the state of Georgia, permitted to go to their graves of their ancestors. So if the family's buried there, legally, the owners have no leg to stand on.
And we know that, but we try to be considerate too, because we had to go all the way down their driveway to get to the back of the property to get to the burial site. So yeah, that's something we're going to have to look into. Somebody else had a question?
Yeah.
There's a wild cemetery in Bewley, like enough water plantation. Do you know anything about that one?
Yes. Nathaniel Wildes, Wilds, was not connected to us at all. He was from, and I don't remember where, but I did do a little bit of research on his family just to debunk one way or the other as whether or not we were connected, but we are not connected to him. But his descendants are, most of them are down in Nassau County. I think there were some in Camden at some point, but I honestly don't remember where he was from, but we are not connected to him. I did make sure to figure that one out because I wanted to be clear on that too. So.
I wanted to ask John's Nunez of Portugal was she a Jew?
No.
No.
That was a question for a whole other ball game, another branch of the tree, and we're going to work on that. We're going to start having special groups for that too. But she was just asking me if Sarah Jane Nunez was Jewish, but no, she was a descent of Portuguese Jews.
Is that marker there near Obadiah? Is that right? Am I talking? Is there something near Obadiah?
It's kind of in that area, but it's a little bit further. It's northeast of Obadiah's.
You can tell families in here, can't you? Because they know enough to know what to ask. All I had was what was the youngest child. Do we have any more questions? Sarah, you've done a wonderful job.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for Carolyn and Donna and all of y'all for what you do. I appreciate it.
You might mention the Facebook page that if any family members have.
Oh yeah, if any of the family members are interested or anyone else is interested, we do have a Facebook page for the Wildes family. Get on there, ask to join. I don't think I have to approve them to join it. I'm not sure, but if you want to join, I'll approve you. It's not a problem.
But there's also the ancestry information on there too, if there's any family that haven't done it yet.
Yeah, any of the family, if you don't mind while I'm here.
Yeah.
Any of the family that you do not have your name, your children's names, your parents' names, anybody that's not in the book, get with me and Julie. We'll get you a form we'll let you know how you can get your form to fill it out. We'll give you the information on how to get it. I did not bring any.
Yes.
Yes. In fact, the form is on the Facebook page. You can download it, print it
Yes,
out.
ma'am.